Hello and welcome to the first in a special series of interviews and pieces of content that we're putting together about the commemoration of Bloody Sunday. It was a day on November 21st in 1920 when 14 people died in or around Croke Park Stadium in response to 16 people having died from the British intelligence services as well. A day that marked the War of Independence and a day that runs deep in the veins of anybody involved with the GAA. One of those people, who is the events and education manager at the GAA Museum and is also the grand niece of Michael Hogan, who was the only player to have died that day, is Julianne McKeigue. Julianne, I'm delighted to have joining us today. You're very welcome to Sport for Business.
Thank you so much for having me, Rob.
Your story is one that you couldn't have made up if there were marketing people that were looking at thinking of how we could actually celebrate this, because your granduncle was Michael Hogan, after whom the Hogan stand is named, but who was the Tipperary back on that day, who was the only player to have, fallen to his death on the pitch. How much did you know about the story growing up as a child?
Yeah, as you say, it's a coincidence that I'm working where I am now. I knew the story always. It, I suppose, wasn't talked about a whole lot, in that the family would have marked the anniversary and things. But because I suppose I'm a little bit removed, and that my granny, who was Michael Hogan's sister, would have died before I was born, my mum's mother. I wouldn't have met her to hear her accounts, but I would know through, like, my mum and her brothers and sisters, what happened. We always knew about it. It was a story every time we went to Croke Park. We always, sat in the Hogan stand, and it was always with us. But it's really only now, I suppose, 100 years on, when people are starting to talk about it more, that it's really impacted me, and I kind of get the whole the gravitas, I suppose, of it. I did do my Leaving Cert history project on Bloody Sunday, so I've always had an interest. But we'd be a big GAA family anyway. I'm from Tullamore, so a big Offaly fan, and my dad is Kiltormer, so he's a big Galway hurling. So we always would have been GAA, and I suppose the Hogan story then was always important in that side of things as well. There were a big GAA family. Mick's brother Tom, who was a Christian brother, the college's cup is actually named after him, the Hogan Cup. So yeah, they were an interesting family. But I suppose there were farmers from Grange Mokler, which is a small town and village really in Tip. And my mum would have remembered going down to the home house a lot, and she would have had cousins that are still living in the house. So she would have always had that connection, I suppose.
And little could they have known that the day was going to end as it did back there in 1920. The notion of history remembering those that have led the way, the fact that we are standing on the shoulders of giants that have done ordinary things, but which look extraordinary when we look at them back through the lens of history. That's something which the GAA Museum was created in order to actually bring to life. Does it feel extra special now when we come to these commemorations, the centenaries, and, in the coming years, there will be plenty more in relation to the GAA as well? How important a legacy is it, do you feel, for the museum to actually bring these things to life?
Yeah, it's a good question. I suppose there's a few parts to it. The museum, as you say, celebrates really GAA. So most of our exhibitions would be winning captains' jerseys, the creation of the association, and really like happy stories about fans and captains and lifting trophies. So this is a little different. So I suppose it had to be handled differently. And I think Joanne Clark, the curator, has done a great job in the space. So they've kind of created a transition kind of walkway into the area, where all the victims are named. There's portraits of them all done by our colleague David Sweeney, and then objects, artifacts, photos relating to the victims and telling their story. And I suppose I'm conscious because of my connection to Michael Hogan, that's, I suppose, my own story, but there were 13 other victims as well. And obviously more that morning and later that night as well. But from the Croke Park part of the story, there was 14 victims, so not just Michael Hogan. So I think the GAA have probably always remembered him, and that, you know, there's a statue in Tipperary and the Hogan stand was named in his honour. But this is a time really for the other families as well, and for those victims to be remembered. So when you go into the exhibition and you see the stuff, the names are being read out, so you'll remember them as well. And then they also have the witness statements. So we asked our tour guides to record the witness statements from the day, so that audio is playing while you're in the space. So I think that really, you know, drives home what happened. Like, these were just people like you and me who love going to a match, went to a football match. Now, albeit it was turbulent times, but it was still just going to a match, and they just didn't come home. Like, that's unheard of, and it's very recent, 100 years ago. So it's quite emotional. It's a sensitive thing to handle. But I suppose as a museum, what we do is we tell the story of what happened. We just present the facts, we show the objects, and you leave people to come away with their own thoughts and emotions. I think that's important.
I think that has been a theme throughout much of the celebration, throughout Michael Foley's book and the podcast, and the visual storytelling that has been a part of it. The exhibition itself was open for one day before we went back into lockdown. Nice that it was created so you don't have to worry about all of the little bits and pieces, but it will reopen again. And how long do we think that it might actually be there for people to go and see it?
Yeah, as you say, it's disappointing for everyone working in museums at the moment. We are online a bit, but I'm not sure. Like, initially the temporary exhibitions run every year, so it would be you know, a year from when it opens. We're hopeful, I think, that some of that this one will get to stay, so people will have a chance to see it. As you say, we opened, I think, on a Wednesday, and Dublin went back into level 3 lockdown on the Friday. So museums are on level 2, so until we go back to level 2 as it stands, we won't be reopening. So heartbreaking for Joanne, the curator, who spent the summer putting it together, and particularly, you know, donors, families, lenders who had given stuff for the thing, for the exhibition. Some of them won't have had a chance to come in and see it. Now, there was a day where they were invited to come up, but all of them may have not been able that day. So for them particularly, it would be lovely to see it. So we're hopeful that it'll extend beyond the calendar year. We'd also like to get secondary schools in particular in to see it. One of my remits is education, and history teachers would be a very important kind of target audience for us. So we'd love to get them to come up and see it. And school tours probably won't be happening this term or next term, so it's more than likely going to be the following year. Now, we are doing some virtual tours, so we've got a short film of the exhibition which we've recorded, and we're going to do Q&As through Zoom or through Microsoft Teams with our tour guides, so they'll be able to call into a history class, and then maybe also give them some more resources if they want to go and do their own project. So that's just a kind of thing to keep in touch. We're doing that for free, to keep in touch with the history classes. And then hopefully they'll get to come and see it. And it might inspire some of them to do further research for their Leaving Cert topics as well. It's one that does come up, and we do get a lot of queries. And one of the other things is just the general public. Like, we've gotten an awful lot of unsolicited emails, you know, people just expressing interest, their own poetry that maybe was created in their family, music, written pieces. So there's a lot of kind of interest. It's actually been amazing to see, and that's only from a museum point of view. I'm sure Tipperary GAA and the GAA centrally have gotten a lot of stuff as well. So there's a lot of material there, so we'll archive all of that too, and that'll be available. But yeah, it's been an incredible year in many ways. We've learned how to put events online very quickly. Our lecture series that's been running since September all went online, which actually, looking back now, is a good thing, because we have all of the amazing lectures still available. There's a couple of really interesting ones. Will Murphy did a very interesting, and it was new research on sport and revolution in general in Ireland. And they're all available now to look back on, which we probably wouldn't have had if we just had live events. So it's a learning curve. I think a bit of both would be great going forward, that we have the live events, but we record them as well. So it's been a learning curve. But everybody working in events and sport and museums and culture and art has had a crazy year. So yeah, I'm not sure how we'll look back on it, maybe with a little bit of PTSD.
It has been a year of rare adaptation, but that's what we do. That's what as humankind manage, and we will pass through this. We will get back into the GAA Museum to see the wonderful exhibition. But as you say, there are parts of it which are online at the moment. So important to remember the stories that have created the present, and will focus us on the future as well. And sometimes history gets overlooked in the rush to look at the here and now and what's coming next. But brilliant job on doing it, especially so given the family connection as well. Thanks a million for sharing that with us. We will play out with the video which has been created as part of the GAA celebrations about your granduncle Michael Hogan. But for the moment, for the time being anyway, and until we get into Croke Park to see the GAA Museum exhibition, Julianne McKeigue, thank you very much.
Thank you.